So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We have a very special subject to discuss today, which is what would happen if we lived forever, basically. And I think in our childhood times, we've always dreamed of superheroes, supermen, superwomen, whatever figures you could imagine, who had this eternal power to live forever, basically, and to never die or to be reincarnated, to be revived, and so on and so forth. And it's actually a pretty interesting philosophical subject for me personally. I think for many of you as well, because it could be maybe reality one day with the current technology and the progress that we're heading towards. I'm not ruling anything out. Right now it seems pretty impossible, but maybe in a few thousand years, if we even make it to that point, maybe it might be. But then this is exactly the question: what would exactly happen if we actually lived forever? And it is not exactly a straightforward question or not a straightforward answer as to what would happen, because on the one hand, if we did live forever, then what are the consequences if we didn't, like we are now? We are not immortal, we are mortal creatures. We kind of know our lifespan, so to speak, but we don't know the afterlife of that. But that's not really part of the question. And I think this is a popular question among a lot of tyrants and dictators who have throughout history asked themselves or searched for eternal power, eternal existence in order to prolong their dictatorship, their tyranny, and their eternal power for that matter. And this was very important to them, and there were many attempts to find certain elixirs. I think the first Chinese emperor, Qin Shi Huangdi, wanted to find some kind of elixir, and he was poisoned by it. And there were many other kings and tyrants who tried to do something similar of that sort, but didn't work out. Either they were killed, or meaning that they killed themselves accidentally, or it just didn't work out. And basically, up to this date, we are still trying to find ways to live forever or to extend our lives. But the question is that I pose to myself when I read or when I see these kind of articles, people trying to extend their lives, extend human longevity, so to speak. What is the purpose exactly behind it? Now, I'm not trying to sound depressing, or I'm not trying to sound like nihilistic or suicidal, any of that sort. Like, that's not even part of the whole discussion. But I'm just thinking from a philosophical perspective. And for me personally, I think that oftentimes people try to do such things in order to prevent death, obviously, and this has a lot to do with the fear of death. A lot of people are not so in touch with death, roughly speaking, and obviously since death is very unknown, that a lot of people would rather much avoid the whole concept in it of itself completely and turn over to, well, how can we just simply keep on existing, right? And there was actually a story from Alexander the Great, but I'm not sure if it's even accurate or if that was actually the case, if that happened historically. Most likely not, because there's a figure like a crow or a bird that is able to talk to Alexander the Great. So I think it's kind of half true, half not true, or it was kind of fabulized, or it was kind of recreated in some way, shape, or form. And it was actually this Sadhguru guy who he's like an Indian guru in India, and he calls himself Sadhguru. I can share you the link in the comment section down below, or in my description, basically under the video. And he actually talks about the story of the encounter Alexander the Great had with a so-called yogi guy. And so the story basically starts off with Alexander the Great wanting to conquer further lands of India, and he obviously wants to prolong his life onto eternity, basically. And he knows that the yogis know the secret to that, or they have a lot of wisdom and knowledge. And so he tells his troops or his soldiers to find him a yogi. And so the soldiers go out in the search for a yogi, and eventually they do find one, and they encounter him, and they tell him that we want you to come to Alexander the Great and bow down and tell him the secrets of eternity, how to prolong life forever. And basically it took a while for them to drag him over to Alexander the Great, but basically Alexander the Great in the end went to the yogi himself, mounted off his horse. At first he had this kind of egocentric attitude where he didn't want to go off the horse, and the yogi kind of humbled him in some ways, and eventually Alexander the Great went off the horse and he sat down with him and they started communicating, started talking about the whole philosophy of eternity, what would happen if we live forever. And he wanted the secret. Alexander the Great wanted to know the secret of where he can find this special water or this special ingredient to prolong his life forever. And in the end he was like, okay, there's a pond somewhere in the forest. If you go X, Y, and Z in that direction, you will find a pond with special water where if you drink the water you will live forever. And Alexander the Great first thought about it. He was a little bit skeptical of that, but he was like, all right, I'll go there and I'll see if that's true or not. And he kind of gave him like a warning, as was every king, tyrant, dictator, that if you mess around with me, you're gonna get something back in return. I think you know what I mean. And so he went to the forest and he found the pond, and he was very close to drinking that water, but he was stopped by a crow there. There was a crow or some kind of bird, I don't remember exactly. And the crow was basically telling him that, look, I am here living forever, basically, and that is because I drank the water from the pond. And he kind of advised Alexander the Great not to drink the water from the pond because he sees no meaning in life in the end, and he actually wants to die, but he can't. So he's just basically stuck there on Earth forever. He's seen everything, he's done everything, he's experienced everything, just everything has been experienced and done, basically. And he has no will to live anymore. And so Alexander the Great kind of, took a step back and he thought about it, and he was wondering what is actually the core purpose of drinking that water in order to live forever. And so in the end he actually didn't drink the water. He took a step back and he basically returned. So what is the moral of the story actually? Now it doesn't matter if it's credible. I mean, it is kind of credible, or it should be credible, but I mean more like it shouldn't be like based on truly historical facts, but rather we should focus more on the moral of the story right now, because I think that is way more relevant than the actual accuracy, if that actually happened or not. And basically what the moral of the story is that you should rather live a short spanned life but experience as much as you can, do the maximum that you can do, rather than simply living forever and either doing everything, experiencing everything, which eventually it will lead to boredom at first, and eventually after boredom you're gonna want to kill yourself in the end, because it's gonna be so incredibly damn boring on this world, on this planet Earth, that you're not gonna want to do anything anymore because you've already done everything if you actually were to live eternally. And this is kind of the core philosophical question or the core philosophical thought on what would happen if we would live forever. So what is the purpose of living eternally? Well, on the one side, a lot of people assume that if they were to live eternally, they could do everything, or they could spend more time with people they love, and they could experience the world more, they could travel, they could see more things, and so on and so forth. It's a valid reason. I'm not knocking that at all. But at the same token, it kind of feels like, do you know, like when you experience a level in a video game and you've played the map like 100 times and you've done everything, you know all the secret areas and you know all the cheat codes and you know all the, I don't know, certain locations that are maybe interesting to know. You basically know the map from A to Z, everything. And at one point it's kind of like, okay, I'm bored of this. I'm bored of this map. I want to play a new map. So it's kind of the same like living in this world. So if you were to actually live eternally, if you were to imagine that the that the earth is like a little map and you experienced every corner of the world, at one point you're just gonna feel incredibly bored out of it, that you're gonna want to change worlds. And in order to change a world, so to speak, you have to die, or you have to simply exit the world, and exit means basically die. And that's why the crowd feels like he wants to die at this point and not live anymore forever. So I think there's a wide misunderstanding or a misconception of a lot of tyrants who want to live forever just because they are so amused by their power and their influence over their population, their people. And this kind of leads them to a dark hole in the end if they were to actually live eternally. For me personally, and I can only speak of myself, and I hope maybe some of you might resonate with that thought, is that I always live by the stoic principles in this world. So I think Marcus Aurelius said something like, "Death smiles at us all, but all you can do is smile back." This is basically the core tenet of life, I would say, is that there is absolutely nothing that you can do other than smile back at death and accept it and exit the world honorably, basically. And I think when you live a short but an incredible life, it has way more quality than living 2,000 years and not really feeling so fulfilled. And yeah, this is kind of the stoic approach that a lot of stoics take. They prefer quality over quantity. So as to conclude the whole question here, a lot of people have this fear of missing out as well. And this so-called FOMO, fear of missing out, is a very prevailing thought among many people in this current modern day and age, or even throughout history, I would say. And this is also maybe a reason why a lot of people want to live for as long as they can. And I'm not saying that you should live a short life and then, go. But I'm certainly saying that if you were to actually think about it, based on the future technological advancements that we're currently doing or undergoing, it might be possible to even just prolong life up to 150 years maybe, or even 200 years based on all the medical advancements that we have here and just overall every technological aspect of this world. And we can definitely prolong life up to maybe that point, that in some point in the future, maybe in a couple hundred years if we make it to that, hopefully. But I think the idea of living forever, meaning that you take some kind of magical pill and you suddenly live forever and you can't die, you kind of lose a lot of purpose in life. You kind of lose a lot of competition because there's no intrinsic motivation, no intrinsic ambition left for you to even pursue anything meaningful when you know that you're always gonna be respawned, or you're gonna always live and you can't die. It's kind of like, imagine again when you play a video game and you know that you can always revive in the same level, that you're not gonna die, you're not gonna go away or something like that you can try 100 million times. It becomes a little bit senseless and a bit meaningless, right? So it's kind of the same thing with actually living forever. And my last thought on that is that, again, stoic approach is probably the most optimal variant for living a proper and noble life. And I definitely prefer quality over quantity, but again, with the disclaimer, not to say that you should live only 20 years and die, but rather have the normal human standards of lifespan. So 80 to 90, 100 years. I think that is a pretty fair lifespan for a lot of people. And if you think about it, in the past, people lived maybe max 40 years because of the food, the malnutrition, diseases, lack of medical advancements, and so on and so forth. And I think even in the past, a lot of people felt more, let's say, a lot of people valued life much more in the past than we do now, just because we have the ability to live longer. Because again, back 200, 300, 400 years ago, people were dying left and right, and so it was quite a privilege actually to live, to even exist. And I think the the chances of us existing in this universe is 1 in 400 billion or something like that, or I'm not sure, but you can definitely look it up. And so it's definitely a privilege now to live, and it's definitely was definitely a privilege to live back in the old days when you didn't have any additional support such as medicine and good food and so on and so forth, good water, clean water. So you should definitely appreciate all of that. And so yeah, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. I really appreciate your support. It really means a lot to me, and I'm very happy that you guys actually interact with me in the comment sections. It's very fun for me to learn from you. I really appreciate and value your inputs, and I look forward to seeing some more of your comments. And if you have any further suggestions, what topics or subjects I should discuss, feel free to contact me personally. I'll always be happy to review. So that is all for now. Have a good day and see you in the next video.